Today, we want to talk about courage in the midst of fear. And I want to start off with a quote by Nelson Mandela. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. What a powerful statement from Nelson Mandela. If there's one person who has gone through many hardships in life, it is Nelson Mandela, and he rises above all his fears and shows tremendous courage. And so today, we want to talk about courage in the midst of fear. And I want to give you the outline for today's session. So we want to talk about 4 types of fear. First, the fear of self-doubt while waiting. You know, waiting is the most terrible period of our life because you are doubting whether you have done the right thing. Fear of imagining the worst possible. And then fear of failure and rejection when he was asked to confront the king. And then the fear of the enemy's devious plots. But yet in all these fears that we have ourselves, Nehemiah showed tremendous courage. First, what is courage? Courage means you must show up lah. If you don't show up, there's no courage, right? But showing up, but yet submitting everything to God. Courage is also appealing for help. And when you are in fear, you need help, but not demanding help. Courage is purposeful planning. You see, Nehemiah plans, not haphazard request. Then fourthly, courage is confronting realities. The walls are broken, the gates have been burned down, the enemies are there, but not ignoring the challenges that we face. And then finally, courage, I like this, is inviting partnership with conviction. And not getting condescending support. It's not like, pitifully, but getting people to join us as we conquer fear. So let's start with the 4 types of fear. Being a close confidant of the king, Nehemiah had very real fears. In the month of Nisan, which is in April, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. Even though he had decided to take action in Nehemiah chapter 1 verse 11, which is in December, he said, I'm a cupbearer of the king. But he waited for 4 months in April before approaching the king. 4 months. I want to tell you that it must be a very conflictual time while waiting. Those of us who are sick, who are incapacitated or waiting for a business deal, you're waiting. It is very, very conflictual. First of all, there's self-doubt. Can I do it, Then there's relational tension, dispute. Will I offend the king? Right? All these things, it must be in his mind, right? For 4 months. Then there's a timing. When should I do it? When should I talk? If you have a failure in relationship, when should I talk to the person? Will I offend him? And then planning stress, you start planning and how should I get it done? And then you have uncertain resources. Who will help me? Waiting was very stressful and unnerving and created a lot of anxiety in Nehemiah's life. 4 months. 4 months. So, fear of imagining of the worst possible. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Let's understand what he really meant, okay? So, first, imagination. The king's past unfavorable decision. Artaxerxes reigned from years 464 to 424 BC. Remember, he had reversed the edict to rebuild Jerusalem. Ezra, remember, came back to to build a committee, and then they stopped it upon the advice of the commanding officer Rehum and his cohort. And look at the long list of protests. You know, Rehum give the king a long list of reasons why the project should be stopped. First of all, he said, the returnees of the exile were wicked and rebellious people. These are all recorded in Exodus chapter 4, verse 12. You know, if you rebuild the temple walls, would result in less taxes, tribute and duty. Revenues for the Persian Empire would drop significantly. Regard for you, the king, will be dishonored. Rebellion would arise as the people were seditious. Hey, don't trust these Jews. Result will be devastating for the empire. The king will be left with nothing. Now, these are all from Ezra chapter 4, verse 16. You can read that. And reply from the king was he was in complete agreement with Rehum. He said, yes, definitely. And so he stopped the project. So there was fear, right? It's like, I've already said no. You can't approach your boss again for a raise. Cannot, right? You said no. Second, the king's potential misunderstanding of his intention and disposition. I was very much afraid. He said, in sadness of the heart. Nehemiah's words were carefully chosen, by the way, because he did not want the king to perceive him wrongly, that he wanted to rebuild the city. So he deliberately avoided mentioning Jerusalem, remembering the king had already had bad reports about his people. So the phrase sadness of heart is very interesting. It could mean to have a bad heart. You know, the sadness is a bad heart. What was a bad heart? Which might be interpreted as Nehemiah's having some kind of plot against the king's life. Now, this was very real, you know, when you are the Artaxerxes, or everybody wants to also try to plot to kill you, right? So this misunderstanding were quite real during Nehemiah's time. That was why he started his request with, may the king live forever. Because it's like the king might misunderstand him. So the suspicion of a coup was removed altogether. Then he explained he was concerned about his ancestors and ancestry, which the Persian king understood very well, because he also wanted to preserve his ancestry. They'd always be concerned about their ancestry. Then Nehemiah explained why he was so sad. Remembering the state of his people and the concern for his people's safety made Nehemiah's heart very heavy. He was very grieved, as we can read in chapter 1. He had kept his feeling for a while. He must be very sad, thinking and ruminating about all that's happened. But this time, he could not hold it any longer. The king noticed his disposition and sensed there was something deeply troubling in his spirit. Thankfully, the king was convinced and decided to help Nehemiah. So, can you imagine? Fear of the imagination of the worst part. Then, thirdly, fear of failure and rejection. And I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor. By the way, notice the language, if it pleases, and if your servant found favor, the phrase appeared 3 times. The tentativeness of his request revealed the trepidation in Nehemiah's heart. He was afraid. He was really afraid. So he said, if he pleases you, you know, you're coming to this despotic king, you know. He's like going to Putin like that, you know. His tentativeness was not for lack of faith, but the recognition of his own position. He was just a cupbearer and a subject under authority. It spoke of his submission to God's will. For him, he wanted the favor of God, the favor of men, but the favor of men was the favor of God. Then fourthly, fear of the enemy's devious plots. First, the enemy's bitter resentment. When Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Now, this is the same group that created trouble for them. But when Sanballat, in verse 19, the Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite official, and Geshem, the Arab, heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing? They asked. You are rebelling against the king. We see this opposition played out in Nehemiah chapter 4, and we'll talk about that in the 4th session. So, who are these people? Let's get a little understanding. First of all, Sanballat, the Horonite, was from the Moabite town of Horonaim. He was the governor of Samaria. After I'm going to show you a map how challenging it was. Tobiah, the Ammonite official. Tobiah was a Jewish name and not Ammonite. But the Tobiah family had influence in Ammon for a long time, and he was the governor of Ammon. These Tobiats were probably descendants of the Tobiah was rejected by the Jewish community because they could not show that their family were descended from Israel in Ezra chapter 2 verse 6. So there was a long standing enmity between them and the Jewish community. So these are Tobiah, right? Then the third is Geshem. Geshem was a very powerful chieftain and tribal leader of Geda in northwest Arabia. He governed over a confederation of Arab tribes that included Edom and the southern part of Judah. Jerusalem is right there, right? Jerusalem is right there. So yeah, it's right there in the center. And they are all surrounding them. So it is a very, very serious threat. All the neighbors were opposed to the rebuilding of the walls. So the threat was very real for Nehemiah. Then secondly, we noticed the enemy's devious plot. They had rumors and they had ridiculed them. Because earlier, King Artaxerxes had decreed that the Jews to stop the rebuilding. So when the Jewish leader came now as the governor of Israel with the authority to build the wall, that news greatly disturbed them. Obviously, all three, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, felt threatened and needed to oppose the rebuilding. Sound familiar? You know, when you're trying to join NATO and, and join EU, then they start causing trouble, right? Now, not only one, but there are three tribal leaders, surrounding you. I think now is the image seems very clear because you know what you're talking about. So through rumors and ridicules, they accused Nehemiah that the rebuilding was a form of rebellion against the king. They questioned Nehemiah's credentials and intention. They sought to disturb his work. They even claimed themselves to be Yahweh worshippers, but were syncretistic because they adhered to other gods and practiced pagan customs. I like this little poem about fear. You are not afraid of the dark. You are afraid of what's in it. You are not afraid of height. You are afraid of falling. You're not afraid of people around you. You're afraid of rejection, right? You're not afraid of love. You're afraid of not being loved in return. You're not afraid of letting go. You're afraid of accepting the reality is gone forever. Because when you let go, it's gone forever. You're not afraid to try again. You're afraid of getting hurt for the same reason. What are your fears today? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of losing a loved one? Are you afraid of the uncertainty of the future? Are you afraid of your own health situation? Are you afraid of business that will never come back again? Are you afraid of losing your job? There are so many fears. Are you afraid of fear itself? What is the nature of courage? And I want to look at the 5 aspects of courage today, so we understand what courage is. You know, Nehemiah countered every subterfuge and stratagem with prayer, passion, planning, and perseverance. With a resolute refusal to deviate from his goal. He was very clear. It was not about just rebuilding the wall. It is about bringing God's covenant relationship back with his people. That he wanted the people to come back to God. Not just come back to Jerusalem. The walls were just an indication of God's protection. In all these, he was God-centered, a consummate wise leader and master of political diplomacy put to good use. He showed incredible courage. So what is courage? So let's examine what courage is. First of all, I believe courage is showing up yet submitting to God. In other words, being there. The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven. The shortest prayer. Nehemiah was not arrogant. or triumphalist. Even though he had God's promises, he knew he was doing God's work. He went in fear and trepidation, which was a sign of his humility and dependence. He was not like this gung-ho hero, want to fight. No, he showed up first. Why? How did he show up? First of all, he listened to the pains of the people. If you want to show up, you have to listen to the pain of your people. Maybe the one that you're carrying, you have to listen to their pain. You show up. He was there planning and praying during the 4 months of waiting. Praying and planning, praying and planning. He was there stepping out to ask the king. Finally, you got to confront the reality. You got to go and seek the king's permission in the midst of his fear. I like the phrase, then I prayed to the God of heaven. This short, quick, silent prayer showed Nehemiah's centeredness in God. This is what I call flesh prayers. I love flesh prayer. Sometimes you have no time to long, religious, ritualistic prayer. Sometimes when you face your boss, you say, hey, God help me. Wow, this thing is not going well, man. God, please, Or when you are doing your sales, go, oh, God, I don't know what to say, The pressure's on you. Although he was conscious of God, he recognized that matters could go very wrong. There's something about Nehemiah. His prayer was an evidence of a life lived in constant communion with God. Listen, my friend. Listen carefully. We can only send flesh prayers regularly if you have regular communion with God. Because God was always in your mind. But very often, we try to sort it out ourselves. He was completely dependent on God's working in Artaxerxes' heart. Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen, being bound. I like Winston Churchill. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision to show up and to be there. And you have to decide to show up. Secondly, courage is appealing for help, not demanding. I like this. This posture is very good. It's asking for help. Then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. Or I so said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah? Or may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me timber to make beams of the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. Just an interesting note. The word queen, Segel, referred to the king's favorite concubine in the king's harem. So Nehemiah must have found favor with the queen also. He was politically very astute. Notice Nehemiah appealed but did not demand. Very often in our prayers, we are very self-assured or become overconfident. Oh God, you're going to answer my prayer. But he appealed for help. We demand God to act and answer our prayer according to our will rather than submitting to God's will. So I like what John Stott said. Before we pray, thy kingdom come, we must pray, my kingdom go. I love that. When we pray, is it just demanding that God to do our will? Or to say, my kingdom go, then your kingdom will come. With that posture is so important. Thirdly, courage is purposeful planning, not haphazard request. When the king responded positively, Nehemiah quickly seized the opportunity to send in his request. Even though he did not answer the question how long he had to be away, Susa was 2,000 miles away. He quickly asked the God for things, right? Number one, he asked for safe travel, letters to the governors. He wanted an edict from the king to prevent any blockage and to provide safe passage for his entourage. The governors in the region were the ones who were going to oppose the rebuilding. They could not pass through his territory, so you better have a letter from the king. Timber for construction. Letter to Asaph, he requested for supply of timber to be given for the rebuilding of the temple, city wall, and his residence. Notice the specificity of the request showed that Nehemiah had carefully thought through. It was purposeful, not haphazard request. And yet, this is what he said. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letter. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. Again, do you notice that every step of the way, he saw God's hand? And listen, my friend, we must learn to see God's hand in everything that we do. Maybe your loved one is sick, and God gave you a contact for a doctor. You say, God, thank you. And then went for the treatment went well. We said, God, thank you. And then the recovery, coming to 68. I cannot imagine hitting 70, my gosh. You begin to realize that every step that you take, every movement of your limb, every ability to think and write, every ability to talk, every ability to breathe is the hand of God. Truly, truly, truly. He recognized the hand of God in the granting of his request of the king. But God gives more than he expected. God surprised him. The king did more. He sent soldiers to escort the expedition because the king probably knew the enemies were out to get him too, right? You know, when you ask God, very often God surprised us with more than we deserve, more than we ask. Expect God's surprise in your life. So I want to say to you, prayer on one hand, passion, planning, and perseverance are not contradictory, but a part and parcel of Christian living. A sense of dependence upon God, but yet God has endowed you with all the mental faculties and the resources for you to work out your plan. Prayer is where planning starts. But also prayer is also where, in the course of planning, you pray. You know, Nehemiah modeled good leadership. He prayed, he planned, and acted in dependence of God and submission to his guidance and to his will, not my will. Fourthly, courage is confronting realities, not ignoring the challenges. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. So he arrived in Jerusalem. That's a reality. The walls are broken, the gates are burning. The Bible is silent on what Nehemiah did those 3 days. If he followed Ezra, he might have rested, especially after a long, arduous journey. Rest also is very important because before he started doing all his work. Now he has to confront the reality. I like this. Max Dupree said, the first responsibility of the leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you. In between, the leader is a servant. How beautiful this definition of leadership. All leaders, everyone, father, mother, in any leadership, the first thing you have to define reality. What is the reality? And then at the end, to say thank you with a grateful heart. And in between, we serve. That's Nehemiah for you, right? So, what are the realities? The first thing is, you have to do some careful research. What's happening? So I have not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do. For Jerusalem, there was no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. I had one horse probably. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates which had been destroyed by fire. So he moved on to the fountain gate, the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So he slowly climbed up the valley by night, examining the wall, turning back, and re-entered through the valley gate. Nehemiah's God's consciousness was truly astounding. He wanted to move with God. not ahead of him or behind him. But praying and trusting God did not preclude research. Nehemiah had to assess the situation, find out what's going on before presenting his project to the officials and the people, Specifically, he needed to survey the area to know where to rebuild the walls and where to construct the new ones. So, he assessed the damage in the critical areas. Very interesting. So he knows what is really wrong. Some of us who are in trouble, we always say ignorance is bliss. Better not know. Not Nehemiah. And if Nehemiah had cancer, he would go and see a doctor and find out whether it's stage 1, 2, 3 or 4. The gates were very important entry points to the city. It was surrounded by fortified wall to protect the city from the invaders. So I've given a picture of the Jerusalem, and we'll do a bit more in Nehemiah chapter 4. But essentially, he just went through this area because this is a very important area. You see, first of all, the valley gate was considered to have been the chief gate, 500 meters long, the longest gate, which provided fortification of the city in the western wall. The Jackal well provided source of water. So this water gate, it was on the east side of the valley and west of the southwest of the wall. Then the dung gate, where all the dumps are, all the rubbish, probably must be a huge rubbish dump, So he had to clear everything, right? So these are all important parts. And the fountain gate. Now this fountain gate is very important because it stands for its proximity to water. If you are besieged, water is very important. This was located some 200 meters south of where the Kidron and Hinnom valleys are. And then the king's pool is also here, was a receiving pool for the overflow of water. And it's very interesting, King Hezekiah was the one who built a canal for the water to flow into the city in case the city was under siege. If you go to Jerusalem, you can see Hezekiah's canal. It was very important. When the city was sieged, there's water. So he went to all the critical places and to assess the damage and to do a lot of research. Finally, courage is inviting partnership with conviction and not just getting condescension support. He really wants them to put in all their hearts and minds. Let's see how Nehemiah did it. The official did not know where I'd gone, what I was doing, because as yet I said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or official of any others who would be doing the work. Then when he had completed the survey, then I said to them, and I want to go through this. There are 9 steps that he did. Okay, I will just go through this. Then I said to them, you see the trouble you are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start building. So they began this good work. So let's go through this. First of all, the officials were just general term for leaders. Nehemiah was able to discern, to enlist them for this building project. He knew how to motivate them with conviction. His message was clear and precise. He did it in 9 steps. So let me go through the 9 steps, which are very interesting. First, he identified with the people. He said, you see the trouble we are in. Look, I'm with you. I know what you are going through, okay? Nothing motivated us most than to know that we are in this. My leader knows the pain that I have. Number 2, he defined the reality. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. So he told them, right? This is the reality. He stressed the seriousness of the situation. Third, he challenged them to action. Come, let us rebuild the wall. He issued a clarion call to take action. 4, he appealed to their pride. We will no longer be in disgrace. Hey, come on. It's like the boss telling, this is our company. This is for us. This is what we should do. Don't be disgraced. He motivated them to dignify themselves and not suffer disgrace anymore. This was the emotional connection. It's about us. It's about you, your identity. Then faith, he recounted God's movement. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon. He must have told them what happened. 4 months of waiting. How King Artaxerxes has provided amazingly. You understand? You must recount. Say, hey, God has been with us. To motivate your people. I can think of eagles because we've been together for 54 years. So next year is 55 years. But every year we face all kinds of challenges. But God provided for 54 years. My goodness. 54 years. Then sixthly, challenge them to respond with a new project. Let us start rebuilding. Don't sit down. Move up. He called them to action and they responded with one voice. And he mobilized them to action. So they began this good work. He reminded them that this is good work. And this good work is God's work. It's not about me. The rebuilding is for God. Then 8, he rebuffed the enemy. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Nehemiah had to deal with the detractors and discouragers. He had to rebuff them, for they were out to destroy. There are people in your organization, sometimes in your family, there are detractors. You have to deal with them. 9, I love this. Always turning them to God. It's not about me. I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. He reminded them that this was God's enterprise, and he turned them back to God. It's not about Nehemiah. It's not about Jerusalem. It is about God. Does that make sense? So whatever you do, it's about God. So in summary, Nehemiah faced many fears, but his God consciousness gave him courage. So where does courage come from? God through you. He was so in tune with God that he sought wisdom from him all the time till the project was accomplished. Nehemiah was focused on his mission. Restore Jerusalem to a state where it was pleasing to God. He never wavered from that call. Nehemiah responded with compassion, with realism, with conviction and faith. And then finally, Nehemiah enlisted people to build the walls. He could not do it alone. This chapter is packed with action. It depicts Nehemiah as a model leader, humble, trusting God, willing to act, careful planning his project, and wisely sharing both his vision and faith with the leaders and community of God's people. Can you think of anyone like that? I can. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. If there's anyone who should be terrorized by fear, it must be President Zelensky of Ukraine. And he demonstrates all the 4 aspects of courage that I talk about. President Vladimir Putin of Russia unleashed the terror of war in Ukraine, a population of 44 million people. His goal was to overrun Ukraine, overthrow the government, and install a pro-Russian government that will put an end to Ukraine's desire to join the European Union and the defensive alliance of NATO, which was seen as a threat to Russia. Let's compare the military capability between Ukraine and Russia. It was indeed a David versus Goliath battle. Russia had 1,328 attacking aircraft versus 146, 10%. Attacking helicopters, 478, Ukraine 42. Mobile rocket launchers, 3,391 versus 400. And you can go on and on. What? 10 to 1, how to fight. But Zelensky showed up. He was there in the battlefield throughout the past 4 weeks, leading his cabinet, past 8 weeks now, mobilizing his troops, governing his citizens, and championing his cause around the world. His informal t-shirt, I like that, his informal t-shirt, had become a familiar sight to all. He was never cowed by the military might of Russia, even though he was the public enemy number 1. They wanted to kill him. Secondly, he appealed to his people. He never demanded. The president and his team had been marshalling his people to defend their homeland. They've been appealing to people all over the world for volunteers, financial support, food supplies, medication, hospitals for children suffering from cancer. As of March 11, 20,000 International Legion fighters from 52 countries have volunteered to fight in Ukraine. Purposeful planning, not haphazard requests. Look at how he and his team had unified all his people Factories normally in the business of building combines of agriculture use are now mass producing metal spikes to stop cars from advancing on roads and fusing all railway tracks together to create hedgehogs, those giant axes to stop the tank. In Western Ukraine, more than 100 volunteers gathered in what a normal time would be a school gymnasium. Now it's a place where civilians are creating camouflage nets for military checkpoints and vehicles. Taras Damkura, a businessman, owns a mall and business center in Ternopil and is turning into a refuge for internally displaced Ukrainians. At the mall, they are preparing for children to arrive, building bunk beds up to 60 with the mattresses covered in cartoon figures like the Teenage Ninja Turtle. Nearby, teenagers, not much older than the children who will sleep at the mall, are helping to organize food stalls for the army. There are volunteers in Kyiv. They are canning and preserving meats, collecting basic pantry items and organizing medication for the front line. Then he confronts reality, but not ignoring the challenges. 5 million Ukrainian refugees and still counting. Civilian deaths are now more than 1,964. 2,630 injured with 161 children died. 300 died in a theater that was used as a shelter. 500 educational institutions destroyed. That's a reality. Inviting partnership with conviction, not getting condescension support. I like that. President Zelensky has been addressing the global leaders, tailoring his speeches to the different audience. His purposeful planning. He has spoken to UN General Assembly, Canadian Parliament, French Parliament, British House of Commons, Japanese Parliament, EU, NATO, US Joint. His appeals were very, very targeted. So I want to show you a 3-minute interview of Zelensky. You can see the humanness of this person.
Mr. President, thank you so much for taking your time and talking exclusively to the public broadcasters across the whole Europe and the whole world at this extraordinary time.
My name is Angelina Karaikina, and I'm from the Ukrainian Public Broadcaster. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, to the world's public broadcasters, at this incredibly difficult time.
Mr. President, thank you very much. First question, how are you? And can you tell us more about your personal life in this building? I know it's not about you, that's what you're going to say, but we'd like to know, do you sleep well? Do you have time for yourself? Do you see your family? Do you have time to read?
First, how am I? I feel fine. I believe that I'm not sick, and I am a perfectly healthy man. I understand exactly what is happening. I make accurate decisions calmly. I think it's important for us to be very balanced now. Our military is showing its strength. It is also necessary to show balance, to remain strong fighters, to defend the state. At the same time, to show attitude even to the enemy, to show human attitude. It is very important for me that people see that we are defending our state. But I repeat, with a human face, that we do not torture people. We are showing that we are ready to defend and not ready, so to speak, to win at any cost, because this is not a game. And so we are highlighting the difference between the people who came to invade our state, who came to our land. It is very important for us to show that our people are fighting in a civilized way. That is very important. I'm more focused because a lot of things depend on me. I want to give only the positive, not in the sense of smiling, but positive in terms of my actions. And I do not want to harm any of our citizens. People are important because you see that the people themselves are defending our state. This means that they are our most important and possibly only treasure and protection. This is our Iron Dome. This is our security union. This is our people. Regarding what I read now, I don't read fiction right now, to be honest. I love it, but I understand that I can't. I read the first page, but then by the second, I'm already thinking about what's happening here. So I read the second page again, because I didn't take in what I had read there. Then I move on to the third and forget again. Because the head, the brain, are clogged up with other processes, other decisions. It's difficult to relax.
You know, truly, is a modern-day Winston Churchill. He has become a war hero, a legend. He has shown tremendous courage in the midst of all his fears. See the way he's so calm and focused, that he cares for his people and also the enemies. He's so human. He's so human. So let's get to the application. How can you find courage in the midst of fear? What kind of courage do you need now? You are facing some fears in your life. Maybe you have been withdrawing. You are so scared. Maybe it's time to show up, but yet submitting to God. Maybe you need to appeal for help, but yet not demanding. Maybe you need to do some purposeful planning. You have been quite haphazard. Maybe you are not confronting realities. What is it that you need? What realities you have to face? And maybe you need partnership. Maybe your friends, your family, asking to come alongside you to support you. I want to end off with a quote. I happened to watch Evan Almighty last night. I don't know whether Channel 5 is a very old movie. You know, Evan Almighty was God asking this congressman to build an ark. And God told Evan, if I wanted to give you patience, I give you opportunities to practice patience. If I wanted to give you courage, I give you opportunity to demonstrate courage. And it's so true. Some of you may think, why? How come God put me through this? But it is an opportunity for you to practice God's character in your life. Thank you very much.
All the way my Savior leads me, what have I to ask beside? Can I doubt His tender mercies, who through life have been my guide? Heavenly peace, divinest comfort, here by faith in Him to dwell. For I know whatever befall me, Jesus doeth all things well. For I know whatever befall me, Jesus doeth all things well. All the way my Savior leads me, cheers each winding path I tread, gives me strength for every trial, feeds me with the living bread. Though my weary step may falter, and my soul athirst may be, gushing from the rock before me is a spring of joy I see. Gushing from the rock before me is a spring of joy I see. All the way my Savior leads me, oh, the fullness of His love, perfect rest in me is promised, in my Father's house above. When my spirit hours of day. This my song through endless ages. Jesus led me all the way. This my song through endless ages. Jesus led me all